there have been additions that have been made to the transfers to provinces. These are mainly just to indicate that this transfers over the MTEF, they total about, these are just additions, the new money. They total about 92.7 billion over the MTEF. And this is made up of 76.9 billion for the provincial equitable share and 15.8 billion for the conditional grants. And in the subsequent slides, we are going to unpack this number so that you can see how this we arrived at this total. But just to indicate that in terms of the additions that were made, they were made mainly to respond to the existing pressures that we know which are in the system, and also there have been projects that have been approved through the budget facility for infrastructure to kind of fast track the delivery of the infrastructure, and also for the repairs and the rehabilitation of the infrastructure that has been damaged by the April 2022 floods that happened mainly in Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. Next slide, please. So here, in terms of the slides, what we are showing the annual updates that we are doing to the provincial equitable share. And we always try to use the most recently available data to make these updates. So on the right-hand side, what we are showing the 6 components that make up the provincial equitable share, with the education component and the health component kind of constituting the biggest shares of this equitable share. And on the left-hand side, we are showing a table showing which data has been used to update the equitable share for the 2023 MTEF. And in terms of in all the components where the population data is being used, we are using the most recent data that is available, which is the 2022 mid-year population data. However, for other data, such as even for where the insurer, when we are looking at the health component, for the insured people, we are using the most, also the recently available data, which is the 2021 General Household Survey. But honorable members can see that even there we are updating using the 2018 General Household Survey data, just to explain. This data was used when we recently reviewed the health component. And this data, when we were reviewing the health component, we are looking at factors that are going to go into that health, the risk-adjusted index. So just to indicate data that is being included in the using this 2018 General Household Survey, it will be things like, for example, what it cost a 30-year-old male to get, like the cost for giving them medical attention, or say a 35-year-old pregnant woman, things like those, which this data does not change much from year to year, but it will be reviewed periodically. And currently the recommended review period will be around 5 years, so that we sort of keep updating that. And the other data that we have used in terms of the patient load data, this is the data for people going to health care facilities. Previously, we had used the old data because it was affected by COVID, as people were not going to like the health care facilities given during the COVID time, but it has since recovered. And right now we are using the most recently available data for the two financial years, which is 2019-20 and 2020-21. So this is the most recent that is available. And then in terms of the GDP, the regional GDP, we are using the 2019 data because Stats SA has indicated that this is the most recently available data, as they are currently reviewing the data series for the regional GDP. So as and when we get the most updated data, then we'll use that for the updating of the provincial equitable share. Next slide, please. So in terms of this slide, now we are going to indicate what makes up that 76.9 billion that we said has been added to the provincial equitable share over the MTEF. In terms of in responding to the spending pressures that are already in the system, 20 billion over the MTEF is added for the education sector. This is to respond to the COE pressures, so that teachers can be paid and all that, because it's only when teachers are in class that education can take place. And also for the health sector, given that due to COVID, there were some service backlogs, given people were not going to the health facilities, funding to the tune of 23.5 billion over the MTEF has been added. This is to respond to those healthcare service backlog, COE pressures, and the purchase of medical supplies and sort of other medical goods. And then also due to the implementation of the 2023 wage to cater for the carry-through costs of that implementation over the 2023 MTEF. This funding, that means, is only added from, that we are reflecting here, is only added from 2023-24, because the funding for 2022-23, that was done already. So these are just the carry-through costs, the tune of 31.1 billion. They have been added. These are going to the province, and they have been allocated using the provincial equitable share formula, and also to respond to the funding arrears in terms of the compensation of easing donors. 631 million is being added to the KwaZulu-Natal. And also we indicated that funding is being added for projects that have been approved through the budget facility for infrastructure. So for the Kucha SEZ, which is in the Eastern Cape, 1.8 billion is added over the MTEF. And this is to ensure that the funding deals with the water projects that are within the SEZ, to ensure that the SEZ is able to provide the services that are needed. And next slide, please. So in terms of the changes to the provincial conditional grants, now here we are explaining the additional 15.8 billion. So recently the ECD, or the Early Childhood Development, has been moved from the Social Development to the Department of Basic Education. And to ensure that more children are accessing the Early Childhood Development Subsidy, and also to provide for pre-registration support, and also to pilot the nutrition support program, 1.6 billion is added to the Early Childhood Development Grant. And then also to ensure that the almost 9 million learners, they are the food that they get daily when they're at school meet the nutritional requirements, 1.5 billion is added over the MTEF to the School Nutrition Program Grant. And for the this one is this edition that I'm going to talk to now is the one that has been approved through the budget facility for infrastructure, and it's for Gauteng province, whereby 1.5 billion is added to the education infrastructure grant, and this is for the program called the Gauteng School Program. And Also, what we indicated was that funding has been added to respond to the disasters that happened. And for the carry-through costs in terms of the schools that were damaged during the April 2022 floods, 300 million is added only in the first year of the MTEF. And this is because of the assessment that was made, showing what was required. And this money is added through the education infrastructure grant. And when coming to the transport sector, previously there have been calls to say that the provincial roads are not in a good state and that something should be done about it. So in responding to these calls, in terms of refurbishment of the backlog in terms of provincial roads, 6.8 billion is added to the provincial road maintenance grant. So we are hoping this will assist towards betterment of the provincial roads. So that
my apologies, Mr. Daga. I am not intending to interrupt, but I tried to tolerate. I thought you will read the message or somebody will alert you. We can only see you from your eyes up. We can't see you well. And if it's yes, that's better. That's better. For others, please do the same, frame yourself correctly. Thank you. And apologies for it.
My apology, Chairperson and honorable members. I wasn't able to see the message, and unfortunately I cannot also see myself. So I wasn't aware that I'm not appearing fully. Apologies about that. When I'm continuing with the transport sector, also during the adjustment budget, funding for the building of rural bridges was only added for 2 provinces, but we indicated then that more funding will be added over the MTEF, and then more provinces will also benefit from that. And for this building of the rural bridges, 3.7 billion is added to the provincial road maintenance grant. And also this is approved through the budget facility for infrastructure, and the program will be implemented under the Welisizwa Rural Bridges Program. Next slide, please. So when coming to the agriculture sector, also this funding has been approved through the budget facility for infrastructure, whereby funding is added for the KwaZulu-Natal Agri-Hubs. This funding is added through the Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program to the tune of 153 million. So, and moving to the health sector, previously funding has been approved through also the budget facility for infrastructure for the building of the Limpopo Central Hospital. But given the progress with this project, funding is being rescheduled such that the funding that is made available correspond with the cash flow requirements of the project. As indicated, in the first year, the allocation is being reduced, but more funding is added in the 2 outer years of the MTEF. This does not necessarily mean that we are taking away the money from this project. The money that was approved through this BFI will still be the same. It's just that we are rearranging the funding so that it aligns only to the cash flow. And then also when it's coming to the human settlements sector, from the 2023-24 financial year, the provincial emergency housing grant will cease to exist. This is because this funding has been moved to the national department so that they are given the flexibility to respond to the housing emergency, and also they can be able to respond quickly. Next slide, please. Honorable Chair and honorable members of the committee, On this one, as National Treasury, we are making a plea to yourselves to allow us to make changes to one of the Department of Health grants. This is because post the tabling of the budget, the National Department of Health has been engaging National Treasury and indicating that there has been a measles outbreak. And this was not catered for when the budget was being tabled. And to be able to respond this and to give the flexibility for funds to be used, what we are asking is that before we table the conditional grants for the health, we amend one of the grants to ensure that it caters or allows for funding to be used to respond to the measles outbreak. And one of the grants that we have identified, even though we're still working the details around, will be the district health grant, which previously accommodated the COVID-19, the response to COVID-19. Currently for that grant, all the funding has been allocated for the programs. However, if there is funding, there is a need for funding to be reprioritized within those programs, then the provinces have to get approval from the National Department of Health. So that means there will still sort of be the due diligence that the department will make for this funding to be available. But given that there is this outbreak that has been identified, we are humbly asking the committee to allow us to make changes to one of that, although currently we are still sort of working the details with the National Department and we are not yet sure about the exact wording. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members and colleagues. I will hand over to Zetun Mube to take us through the local government slides. Thanks.
Good afternoon or good evening, honorable members. My name is Letsaya Papakis. I will be taking you through the local government allocations. Honorable Chair, can you confirm that you can see me clearly before I can continue? Okay, I'll just continue. Bongani used for me is this slide, honorable members, is really just I think a full picture of all the allocations that flow to local government on terms of the different components. So we've got the equitable share, which constitutes one of the unconditional allocations to local government, which is the biggest allocation to local government, and the RSC levy, replacement fund, mainly funding our district municipalities. We also have the support for councillors in municipalities for their remuneration there, as well as that of the ward committees. And then that is kept by the general fuel sharing levy for the metros. So that just sums up, the list of the unconditional transfers to local government, and these constitute the majority of funding that flows to local government, which is in the tune of 67%. Then the rest is really the conditional grants that then flow to local government, and these constituted the last portion in terms of the direct transfers, which is close to 33%. And of course, here the bulk is really in the infrastructure space, dominated by our general purpose grants in terms of the municipal infrastructure grant for our smaller and medium-sized municipalities, but then for our more affluent municipalities, we have the USDG as well as the urban settlement development grant, that is, as well as the new grant for the intermediate cities. It's suffice to say, though, honorable members, that the local government fiscal framework is designed in such a way that it is largely self-funded. So this is due to the municipalities' revenue raising powers that have been afforded to them. Hence, we do see that it still accounts for 10% of the national raised revenues. It's quite important to also add, honorable members, that over the MTF period, the local government allocations have actually increased. They increased by quite a large sum of amounts. So that is the total of 14.3 billion. And in the main, 8.1 billion of that is added to the equitable share, so that our municipalities can afford to provide the basic services to our indigent households. Then there's an addition to the tune of 6.2 billion to our direct grants. Really, this takes really the total direct allocations to local government over the MTF to a very healthy 521.7 billion over that period. So mainly, I think in the conditional grants, honorable members, I'll stick to quite the detail in terms of where the changes are. So if we can move to the next slide, Mongani. So this slide, honorable members, really just tell us more about the equitable share in terms of the work that has been done since we last met with you. So obviously this is the allocation that municipalities, the whole 257 of them share. So it is formula driven with various components on it that then inform the actual allocations that we have. So if you see on the far right, on the far right, that's where we have the two components that specifically focus on the more smaller and poorer municipalities, ensuring that there is institutional stability there in terms of providing funding just for the municipality itself to run an efficient administration. While in terms of the community services, that really funds some of the key service delivery components that are, that move beyond the individuals and tap into the communities there. So the kind of updates we've done there really is to ensure that we align with the growth in these municipalities. So we use the Stats SA data there, the 2021 General Household Survey, which shows that there's in the main, on average, an increase of 2.7%. In terms of bulk water, there's also an average bulk increases there of 8.9%. This hasn't changed from the previous years. And then in terms of the bulk electricity, the honorable members will be pleased to know that we have actually taken into account the approval by NESA, which was 18.7%. And over and above that, we have added a 2% more to ensure that we fully subsidize municipalities for the provision of the basic electricity there. What's important with that additional 2% is that we have in the past picked up that NERSA and the ESCOM processes does not end with that final approval that has been granted. That is actually an opportunity that is afforded to ESCOM to then really look at its customers and decide how it's gonna raise this additional revenue. And because municipalities and national, which is where ESCOM is, they have a difference in the financial years. So ESCOM would actually like to raise the full amount in terms of the revenue potential within the 9 months that municipalities, the overlap there, which then would mean the municipal tariffs would be slightly higher, but we have overly compensated for that. And I think I'll speak more about some additional members in my next slide. And of course, honorable members, for the other variables in the formula, like sanitation as well as refuse removal, we're using the latest figures for CPI as projected there. And again, this is great news that we actually have added 8.1 billion to the formula, and as a result, the free basic services, really the whole package per month now amounts to 528 with the 29 cents per month, which based on our costing should be able to provide the basic necessities to our communities. If we move to the next slide, Bongani. Thank you very much. So in terms of this slide, honorable members, it's really just speaking to that 8.1 billion that we've added, and how much of that has been added in each of the years in terms of the equitable share. And I just want to add to honorable members that even though we've more than compensated for the basic services, but we have left the room for us. We've given, I think, the sector some time to be able to then readjust and make the necessary adjustments in the amendment bill should the need arise. So here I'm talking to the 2.5 billion that is added in the first year, more than compensates for the 20.7 increases that I've spoken to in all the components, really. Then there's a buffer that we have created, and in these honorable members, we're waiting for ESCOM to then finalize their processes so that we can know with certainty where that money can be allocated, because it could be quite tricky if we decided to then allocate all these funds at this point. Well, we don't have the full impact of that decision, because not all the municipalities provided the electricity or have that function of electricity. Therefore, we would have difficulties in terms of having to then take away money. So we rather not allocate it. So there's a of that 2.5 billion, there's a 1.35 billion that remains unallocated there, which will then also assist us in terms of some of the emerging pressures at the local government level. I'm sure the honorable members will appreciate that local government is faced with numerous pressures, and our response to them really need not be harsh. So we do need to give ourselves some time and then respond adequately once we have had all the information at our disposal. There's also really a great move by the department, National Department of Transport, in terms of the rollout of the single integrated ticketing system. And here, honorable members, we're pretty happy with the reprioritization of 8 million in the middle year and then 13 million in the outer year from the PTNG, one of our grants that has in the past shown that it can stomach such reprioritization due to some of the challenges that we continue to monitor, of course. And this single integrated ticketing system will benefit, the users as it's gonna be able to then to link out all these modes of transport, which is something that we fully support. Then, honorable members, I think as indicated in the by Bongani's presentation, also there's the discontinuation of the municipal emergency housing grant. So this now sits within the vote of the National Department of Human Settlement, and the modalities there and the communication with the municipalities who are better placed actually, to carry that process forward. Quite Also, exciting for us, honorable members, is that we continue to have these good working relations with our municipalities, where in the BFI, for instance, where they have capacity issues, they notify us so that we can then readjust their budgets and then bring the money when that capacity has been procured, so that we could only borrow money for that money to then sit in the bank accounts and then only for it to come back. So that's what we're doing really here with the My City public transport network project. We're bringing back the money into the system. This is the money that we would have taken away in the previous years. Now they have readjusted their cash flows and implementation plan, and then we're able to then bring that 461 million over the MTF. We're doing quite the opposite with George Municipality, who we only allocated the money just, I think it was last year. So here there are challenges that related to, some resignation within the municipality. So they didn't see themselves as being in a position to roll out such a project. Therefore, we are reducing the allocation. This is the money that is flowing through the direct regional bulk infrastructure grant. So we're reducing the first year by 136 million and then adding a little bit in the middle year. And again, here, the idea, honorable members, is that in the outer year, we will then be able to bring that money back. So the money, the total cost for the project and the project scopes and all will not change. What will change is just how the funding will then be flowing these financial years. And then in this slide, honorable members, is this for us? I mean, I think I speak for all of us here. This is a really exciting change where we're seeing more of our municipalities exploring the budget facility for infrastructure and actually having bankable projects that are considered for funding there. So for instance, there's 206 million for eThekwini. So that's the total for those 2 years. And this really is funding that we provide for municipal services, which eThekwini is responsible for. But the difference here is the metros in particular, they are so reacting to the daily challenges in the municipalities in terms of the backlogs, that there's sometimes not sufficient money to then explore some of these projects that would bring in the private sector resources and expertise. So these allocations in the main that come from the BFI, they help bridge that gap. So they enable the private sector, in the case of the eThekwini Metro, to then bring in the private sector-led, housing project, which is projected to really create housing developments of about 30,000 housing units there. So the municipality provides bulk, and then the private sector comes in, and then it does the rest. We also see there's a 2 billion also for being allocated to the city of Johannesburg. That also is for these housing-led developments. There's 1.2 billion in total that is towards the Soul Pluggy. And there's really an urgent renewal project that is needed for their water supply infrastructure, which is, if not attended, could really lead to the collapse of the system as a whole, which should really have some negative impacts in terms of health in that municipality. So this will address those Frankenstein municipalities and other of our municipalities that will be getting funding from this BFI port. It's the total over the MTF is about 1.3 billion. This is for their water treatment works and some bulk sewers. Really, this is also to assist them to deal with current demands, but also looking into the future. to deal with some future developments that the municipality is overseeing there. But yeah, I think the last one, the honorable members would also mostly appreciate, especially those that have been following the developments at Pabeja, where there are water supply issues. I think that that's a crisis at the moment in terms of the drought. So there's additional resources to the just close to $1 billion that has been allocated to the municipality to really focus on projects around the immediate water supply challenges in that metro. Honorable members, that sums up our part of the presentation. We'll hand over to Wendy. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pakis, for standing in for Zethu that had load shedding. So it did look a bit different. What I'll do, and this is the last part of the presentation, where I'll just touch on the major policy changes that we're making to the Division of Revenue Bill, the actual clauses. There's also minor technical refinements that we make every year, and those won't be highlighted. So the first substantive change that we're making is to Section 5 of the Division of Revenue Bill. And what it does, and there's two provisions here, and I'll discuss it here and then just jump over it when we get to the second one. We had to make two changes in the Division of Revenue Bill to allow for dates of equitable share payments to local government to be changed. That is the only transfer to any grant that we make where the actual dates are stipulated in the Act to give surety to municipalities. But now we run into a problem if there's a municipality where the equitable share stopped in terms of Section 2162 of the Constitution. So it's just to allow that those dates be changed and also the allocations to those municipalities be changed. But in terms of municipalities that's not subject to Section 2162, the equitable shares will flow as normal. Then in the adjustments budget or the 2022 Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, we presented to the committee that similar to local government, we're going to make provisions for provinces also to pledge their conditional grants. What pledging means is that a province takes its allocations and then undertake a loan so that it can fast-track infrastructure delivery. And then in future years, it uses its equitable share, its conditional grant allocations, then to pay back the loan that is incurred. What we've also done is just in the past, in terms of infrastructure conditional grant allocations, it's just also just to close the loop. In the past, draft reports were submitted, but final reports were not submitted to the transferring office in the relevant provincial treasury, and this is just added to so that there's improved monitoring. And then with regard to Section 16, it is amended, and this is a very important change. And we know that in terms of, for example, the human settlement grants, what happens is that when a province or municipality, when it's close to the end of their financial year and they see they're not going to spend the money, what they then do is they transfer it to a entity and then so that it looks like the money has been spent. In the meantime, it's just been transferred, for example, to the HDA that's under the Department of Human Settlements. And what is done here is that those allocations be gazetted in future. And also what is important, those funds will be subjected to the normal rollover process. So if it's not committed, then it will revert back to the fiscus. So it's just to close the loop of, hiding money in the system. Next slide. Then with regard to the stopping of allocation, Section 18, and I'm sure quite a lot of provincial legislatures will be quite happy to hear this. We know that in the end of the financial year, again, we get requests from national transferring officers where there's underspending to stop the allocation and to reallocate it to another province. And then the province must jump in the last few days of the provincial financial year to get those allocations gazetted. And we've just put deadlines down to ensure that in future those submissions are received more timeously, and to ensure that the system is not under pressure like it's currently. I've already taken you through section 22. It links back to section 5. And then the last one, we do have instances where spheres of government and institutions take each other to court without following due process in terms of the Intergovernmental Relations Framework Act. And what this requirement just requires is that when they want to institute legal proceedings, is just to inform us 10 working days before the time, and then to indicate to what extent they've complied with those intergovernmental dispute mechanisms that's already in the system. Thanks. Next slide. And this is just already mentioned, so I'm not going to take you through that, that this is now a national allocation. And thank you, Chairperson and Committee. This is the end of our slide presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Team Treasury. Can we then take the second presentation? So
yes,
that
Chair.
we have noted the questions, and I think it's Mudise.
Yes, Chair. Good evening. Good evening to the honorable members. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. My presentation is quite short, Chairperson, because it only focuses on the second adjustments appropriation bill. Okay.
Yeah, we can see.
View. Yeah, I just want to make a full view. Okay, thank you, Chair. So basically, why are we coming to the committee now is because we are proposing changes to the normal process that we normally have. So basically what we're asking the committee to consider is an adjustments appropriation bill where we basically bringing to your attention money that was appropriated for spending that was announced by the Minister of Finance, and this would be the Land Bank. And also we are proposing some shifts of funds between and within votes. So that would be the rest of the transactions that I will be presenting to you. So this is just the background information on what allows us to do an adjustments budget. And when we were busy with the hearings, there were comments from different stakeholders that Treasury doesn't do the adjustments budgets. And this is the first time we're doing this for the second time. But I just want to assure the committee that this is not the first time we are presenting a second adjustments appropriation bill. During 2020, we did 2 adjustments appropriation bills and we presented them to Parliament. So the black bullet points are some of the reasons why one will table or National Treasury will table an adjustment appropriation bill to Parliament. But for today, the only 2 that we are bringing to attention are the ones that are highlighted in red and made bold. So when we do the bigger adjustments appropriation bill, Chairperson and honorable members, most of the time we come because of the change or the updates in the fiscal framework that would be in the MTBPS. We also consider what we consider as unforeseen and unavoidable expenditure. And that expenditure is what we present here. And then thirdly, it would be any expenditure in terms of section 16 of the PFMA. That is very seldom we would present that in an adjustments appropriation bill. And of course, we will be presenting rollovers. But for this one is a short bill. The only 2 that we are presenting would be money that was announced by the minister, as well as the shifting of funds between and within votes. The reason why, Chairperson and honorable members, we are presenting this bill together with the Division of Revenue and not waiting for the Appropriations Act or Appropriations Bill discussion is the agency of the bill because this bill is still in the 2022 and 2023 fiscal year, it is basically we need to allocate, if Parliament approves the bill and the bill becomes enacted, we will have to transfer these funds and the departments will have to spend these funds by the 31st of May 2023. And this is because the financial statements are finalized by that time. So the reason why we are asking and requesting Parliament to consider this bill urgently compared to the normal appropriations bill is because we need to transfer the funds. If Parliament approves, we need to transfer the funds and the departments must incur the expenditure by the 31st of May 2023. So, Chairperson and honorable members, the transactions that we will be discussing in this second adjustment appropriation bill would be the three entities, which is the South African Airways, South African Post Office, the Land Bank, and then we will also be looking at the public service wage increases and the political party funds. So quickly just looking at the summary of the wages. So government implemented a 3% increase in the public sector wages. And because this was not budgeted for, we had to allocate additional funding to most of the departments who could not absorb the increases. And the department that got the largest share is police with 1.9 billion. That was additional to compensate for this wage increases. Then defense was next. But of course, honorable members, when you look at the list of the departments that got the significant amount of money, these would be departments that are compensation heavy, and the compensation budgets constitute a larger share of their budgets compared to the rest of the departments. Then, Chairperson and honorable members, we got a request from the Department of Public Enterprises requesting additional funding for the South African Airways, and Cabinet approved that Treasury proposes an allocation of 1 billion to Parliament, and this is basically to deal with to finalize the business rescue plan by settling some of the agreements that were reached between the creditors and the business rescue practitioners. There's conditions, of course, but we're hoping that this is the last transaction or it's the last funding that we will be providing to SAA for them to finalize this deal. Basically, there's three big conditions here. Of course, there are operational conditions that are not here, but the biggest ones are that all government guarantees to SAA will now be cancelled, finalized, and the Takazo needs to provide proof of the strategy equity partner transaction. We need to see the funds before we do this transaction. And of course, National Treasury will have to review the strategy equity partner agreement. And this is just to make sure that the agreement itself, it does not give rise to future fiscal obligations. The table at the bottom just shows the 1 billion as payment for financial assets, but of course, public enterprises as a department, we are also allocating around 5 million just to compensate them for the increases in the wage bill. Turning to the post office, we are proposing an allocation to the post office, but before we even look at the numbers, the biggest problem, honorable members, that we have been having with the post office is that we have allocated money before. The post office received 7.3 billion between 2016-17 and 2018-19. This 7.3 billion was aimed at them implementing a turnaround strategy. There hasn't been a turnaround, or they haven't implemented the turnaround plans, and they continue to experience financial weaknesses and financial difficulties. So what we're now considering is we need to make sure that the conditions that are here must be such that we don't go back again to a point where we need to bail them out again. So basically the first one, which is critical for the National Treasury, is that the accounting authority and the management of SAPO must be held accountable for some of the decisions that they have taken to withhold statutory and other payments deducted from employees' salaries and not paid over to the relevant authorities. And here we're looking at pension, we're looking at medical aid, and we're looking at the debt for SARS. So the management that made those decisions, the department and the shareholder department needs to hold those people accountable. The second one is what we're proposing is to place SAPO under administration, or at least there should be an oversight committee that must be established to make sure that the turnaround plan is implemented, and that oversight committee should be established by the National Treasury and the department, the responsible department. And then thirdly, what we need to consider is the future of SAPO or the turnaround plan has to be aligned to the results of the market study that was done by the department, because there's no point in having an entity that is misaligned to the market study. Then of course, then the future for SAPO will not be based on what is needed in the market. And then fourthly, Chairperson, which is even more critical, is SAPO needs to start selling all their non-core assets. And this is including properties. And the key here, Chairperson and honorable members, is these sales of the non-core assets must be at market prices. There shouldn't be a situation where SAPO is selling this non-core asset at much lower rates, and there's no justification for that. So basically, we are on the more detailed list of these conditions. We're basically asking the department to employ services of a property valuer so that we know what is the value of these properties before the post office can sell these properties. We want to make sure we have value for money, and one way of doing so is to ensure that these properties are sold at market price. So Chairperson and honorable members, this slide just gives you the numbers. Payments for financial assets, that 2.4 billion is what will be transferred for the post office. And then the compensation of employees of 10.5 million, that is the money that was allocated to augment the increases in the wages. The Land Bank, Chairperson and honorable members, is another entity that we are proposing funding for. And basically, these are some of the conditions for the Land Bank. But I think what is critical here is that the Land Bank needs to make sure that they have effective financial management and internal control. This money the bank or the Land Bank must be able to ring fence or safeguard this 5 billion, and it shouldn't be used for legal action by any lender. The Land Bank must also provide confirmation that neither the initial equity allocation for the blended financing or any future cash flow from this program will form part of the cash sweep to repay other unguaranteed lenders. The Land Bank must just also make sure that of this 5 billion, 3 billion goes to a blended finance program, and the last 2 billion then goes towards curing its default position. And of course, the board must make sure that the 5 billion is utilized for the specific purpose that was approved by the Minister of Finance in the different conditions. The Treasury then will be allocated the 5 billion if Parliament approves for the Land Bank. Then the other allocations, Chairperson, that we had to consider were allocations for political party funding. And I think this was mainly because of the recognition that in 2024, it would be an election year. Therefore, we need to augment some of the funding that has been allocated. This slide basically just shows what has been allocated to political party funding. And this is the one that at the top is what we allocate to Home Affairs, which is the IEC. So basically for example, how to interpret this table is that in 2021, so the total 2021 MTF of 510 billion, that was the baseline that was allocated over the 3 years, and there were no additional allocations. But in the 2022 medium-term expenditure framework, the baseline that was there, we increased it by 171 million for 22-23, all the way to 187 million for 24-25. Therefore, for that MTF, the additional allocation for political party funds was 536 million, increasing the baseline to then 1.058 billion. So this additional allocation of 300 million that we're proposing in this bill for 22-23 is going to increase the total allocation for 22-23 to 642, and the total for the baseline allocation will then increase by this 300 million to 1.740 billion. And then the bottom line, that is allocation for political party allowances. These will be allowances that are paid in Parliament. That baseline remains unchanged, and in total is about 3.5 billion. So Chairperson, this will then be the allocations to the IEC. The reason why it's coming in the Home Affairs a baseline or Home Affairs vote is because the IEC responds or reports to Home Affairs, and this will be political party represented political parties funds, and this is mainly for operations. We're proposing an additional 300 million. Chairperson and honorable members, thank you so much. That will be my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mampo. May I request and the team for the presentations, but on this one, as you said, it was the shortest one. My apologies for not opening the video, honorable members. We are on the same struggle of load shedding and weak signal. Lubabalo and Estelle, please assist me in identifying members who wants to speak. They'll raise their hands. And while they do that, I'll make my comment or my inputs. I'll start from the last one that was presented by Mampo. I have a feeling that it is not only on the issue of the post office, it's not only the shareholders' responsibility to hold those people accountable, those that are unable to implement the turnaround strategy. But I also feel that National Treasury, as a custodian of public finances, you guys, you need to take responsibility as the custodian. The view expressed by Omampo when she was presenting is really shifting. I feel like you're shifting the blame only to the shareholder departments. And you as National Treasury is the one that comes to this committee to convince this committee that a bailout should be approved. We don't, as a committee, expect you to behave as money postbox. We need to be convinced. But having said that, I wanted to ask a question, or when you respond to the members, talk to the issue of the conditions that we have put in now, which is a good thing, it's not disputable, versus consequences. I think because there were things that were not done correctly in the post offices, the understanding and all that, you have put conditions, stringent conditions, but stringent conditions, according to me, is not the only thing that is going to assist. There should be corrective measures. Going forward, it's a good thing that you are putting those conditions. And it will also assist us as an oversight committee to measure if the money is spent. We can be able to follow the money if it was spent accordingly as per your condition. But there should be consequences. So isn't anything that has been that has happened to those who were involved at the beginning? So, Memadijeng, Osmadijeng Timia how on slide 9, there you spoke about the issue of the allocation for Izinduna, KZN. I just want you to, when you respond, just clarify. Maybe I'm not the only one who does not understand this, but I want to be convinced why KZN, you mentioned KZN only, or I might have missed in your presentation, why KZN only? Because we have Amakosi in other rural areas, Eastern Cape, for an example, in Mpumalanga, where I come from, we do have such, Limpopo, and I think they need to have those benefits as well for their own communities, to service their own communities. So I want you to talk to that item or that point on slide 9. I think also on as a committee, we are clear that on the submitted on time, and we've been really requesting and pleading with you that these bills need to be submitted on time, but we know that they are regulated. The time frame is not something that you just think about, and even ourselves, as we process them and the provinces, we don't just transact the dates and decide on our own. My question is that when there is the kind of link that I'm referring to, whereby we are rushing things, between ourselves and as Parliament and the department, we normally pass the appropriation bill around June because it deals with the division of revenue bill prior to this submission, or prior to the MTBPS. So I want to have an understanding in as far as that is concerned. I see members, we still have 3. Also, where you speak about the municipal housing emergency grant, I want to understand that this means that now, as of now, this grant, the housing emergency grant, will now fall under the Department of Human Development. That is my question. I'm raising this question because I want to understand whether the funds are part of the overall allocation to the department, or the department will have to reprioritize from their existing budget. I hope you understand my question. It's 2 in 1. So given the huge amount of the money, that's my second question on the Madi Jane team. Given this huge amount of money, which is absorbed by the medical claim in various provinces, I would like to know whether is there any allocation that addresses these medicological claims, which is in the Department of Health at different provinces. And also want to say, I also want to say that I think here I might not be misrepresenting my committee, that I, for one, I welcome the increase in the allocation of the compensation of employees for Izinduna. But please note my question. Why you talk only of KwaZulu-Natal while we have these other provinces that have Amakosi and Izinduna, and there's an overall cry about it. I will leave it at that. I still have other questions, and if they're not asked by other members, I will come back. Can I give Honorable Muletsani?
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me acknowledge the 2 presentations. My first question will go to the second presentation on the 7.3 billion that was given between 2016-17 and 2018-2019 to post office. I just want to find out from the Treasury whether any consequent management was implemented, because the Treasury cannot say they didn't hold anybody accountable. They should, those people at the post office, somebody must be able to account what they did with the money, if really they are still facing the financial constraints at the moment. Second question goes to the first presentation, whereby the presenter spoke about the 2 provinces that are going to be given money in order to be able to build the bridges. I just want to find out which 2 provinces are those, and the criteria that was used to select those provinces. Because I want to believe that all other provinces, they still have the same challenges that those 2 provinces have. Thirdly, on the issue of the ECD, is this process of shifting the ECD from the social development to education completed? Because this process is causing that the ECD educators not to get equal benefits while they are doing the same job, working for same hours. If it is not completed yet, when is this process going to be completed? Lastly, Chairperson, I want to believe it's a comment to Treasury. The Treasury should strengthen the local government to be able to handle the funds and be able to account for, and do away with the provincial sphere. This funding model of division of revenue should be made up of national sphere and the local government. The present model is outdated, and it makes the local government, which is directly servicing the community, to receive the smallest share of the chunk. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ntate Mletsane. Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chairperson. Good evening, colleagues, and all people online. Thank you very much for joining us. Chair, I trust that you set the benchmark for the amount of time we have to ask questions, because I have quite a few. Chair, I'm going to go through them quite quickly. The first one relates to the fact that was mentioned by Mr. Daka in the beginning, that transfers to provinces make up 97% of their revenue. Now, noting from the schedules to the Constitution that provinces have got the ability to raise funds through various other mechanisms, including fines, fees, licenses, tolls, etc. But they seem to be reluctant often to charge these. And also those, particularly the licenses and the fees, appear not to be, increased annually at a reasonable rate, because, of course, that carries with it some political unpopularity. So my question really is, are provinces doing enough to raise their own income where they have been empowered to do so by the Constitution? The question is consistent across both the provincial and local government spheres. We'll get to local government just now. Chair, Mr. Daka also spent quite a lot of time talking to us. In fact, it was close to 6 minutes, I believe, talking about the data that was used and the recently available data, etc. Perhaps Treasury could help us understand when we can expect the census data to come out of Stats SA. I think we're all awaiting it anxiously, because it does help us with decision making, and certainly it informs Treasury's decision making. So I presume Treasury's asked the question on a number of occasions. Perhaps they can tell us the responses they've been getting. We don't, as a committee, have direct access to Stats SA, but certainly we're absolutely reliant on their information to help us plan. So if Treasury can help us just understand what their discussions, what information has been gleaned from their discussions with Stats SA. Chair, I've also noticed as well a big focus in the Division of Revenue about cost of employees. It appears to be kind of an almost skewed focus in terms of this budget. I wonder if Treasury can tell us, how much of this this budget is going towards, refunding employees or paying employees, and how much is actually going to service delivery at the end of the day. I also was interested in the Izinduna compensation. Chair, from a slightly different angle that you had, I want to know how it's possible that arrears, because it was quite clearly stated that these are arrears. Now, I do note that we budget each year, and expenditure must be in line with our budget. So if Treasury can explain to us, please, how arrears come about in terms of the compensation requirements. Chair, I noted that infrastructure seems to be the poor cousin in this budget. I do want to point to the fact that President Ramaphosa previously mentioned that we would have an infrastructure-led recovery when he launched the ERRP. So, Treasury, I'm not seeing that the President's comments are being followed through by this budget. And I think that there's a massive deficit in terms of the infrastructure spend that we have, and too much focus on employee benefits. I really would like a comment on that. So then there was comment made about the Kucha SEZ and BFI's agreement that there'd be money spent on there. Quite interesting. Is it only the one SEZ that's getting funding? Perhaps you can talk to me a little bit more about that. I think one of my colleagues might raise something on that as well. The transport budget that came about, I just want to ask, what about e-tolls in Gauteng? We know that there's an unclear picture. Perhaps you can tell us how much of that money that you put aside for transport will be going to Gauteng to help sort out the e-toll problem. 6.8 billion was the amount given, but I'm sure that there's more money hidden away elsewhere. If you can just give us a highlight about how Gauteng will be assisted to deal with the e-tolls problem that they've inherited through no fault of their own, I'll add. Chair, the housing emergency grant, you also raised it, and the fact that it's going to be moved to national government. Now, of course, the problem I have with that is that with any emergency, normally the response needs to be rapid. And therefore, one would expect a devolution of the authority in terms of spending the money. And putting anything centrally in central government, I believe, would probably slow down the ability to respond to emergencies. So, first of all, I'm questioning that move, and I don't see the logic in it. Taking emergency funding further away from the people. And secondly, I'm asking for a phone number and a name that I can phone when I need to access these. I have got the phone number of our district disaster team. I have got the local government officials' phone numbers on my cell phone. If you can give me a phone number that I can phone as a public representative when I need to get emergency housing facilitated for people that are in immediate need. The next comment was an interesting one, and it was about fiscal. The fiscal framework is the local government fiscal framework is designed for municipalities to be self-funded. A very, very strong, good statement, I think, and probably reflective of Treasury's opinion, which is why they've traditionally had an issue when local government comes back to them and asks about the equitable share. But I do want to say what is being done for local government that does not exercise their revenue collection capabilities, abilities, or authority, because it's quite clear that many local governments do not have the capacity or do not have the political will to collect revenue from their residents. And therefore, their revenue collection is poor, and as a result, they're unable to meet their commitments, certainly towards Eskom, towards the water boards, etc., and even towards employees, as we've seen recently. Now, they are quick to call for assistance and to shout for a review of the equitable share formula, etc., whilst not doing what they should be doing in terms of generating their own income and making sure that their income generational capacity is adequate for their needs. Because it's just too difficult for them to do so politically as well as administratively. What is Treasury doing in order to ensure that local municipalities are empowered, capacitated, that they understand the need to collect revenue and that they actually do so, and where they are not doing so, to make sure that they are penalized or limited in terms of what they can do with the equitable share, certainly, and focusing the expenditure of the equitable share on service delivery projects rather than on political spending, etc. And I just want to give a point that's come up on my group today. So the Mfuleni municipality is well known for not collecting revenue. It's well known for not having meters because they had a failed smart meter project. It's well known for all of these things. It's also well known for not collecting bulk or levying bulk charges for where there's been developments. And yet now they're wanting to spend money on going away on some sort of a junket for politicians to discuss the IDP. They're going to be staying in a hotel for 2 nights and getting transport, etc. later on, when really the people on the ground are not experiencing service delivery. It just doesn't work well. But what is Treasury doing in order to bring them to account? Slide 15 was most interesting. I'm afraid I'm going to have to unpack that one further. It relates to the updating of the formula and the fact that there was indeed big changes made for the electricity and the water board price increases. The one thing that's not included there is the fact that fuel is a big component of municipal spending when it comes to service delivery. It needs to go into the trucks, it needs to go into the graders, it needs to go into all sorts of things. And fuel has increased by over 10% in the last 12 months. Sorry, I looked up the number while while we were getting the presentation. Sorry, it's 14.8% in the last 12 months that fuel has gone up. If you go back, it's more than doubled over the last 10 years. So the reality is that it's a big component of municipal service delivery expenditure, and it's also not been. It's something that's not mentioned very strongly and not considered really from what we can see. Please talk to me about how that's factored into the equitable share formula. The next question I have just relates to NERSA, and is Treasury able to understand whether NERSA will be giving municipalities authorization to levy a similar increase to what Eskom has levied for their bulk increases, or will there be a further erosion of margin? Because we've seen margin squeeze happening over the years, which obviously impacts municipalities' ability to first of all just maintain service, their existing reticulation infrastructure, but also to develop new. And then, of course, the last question I have on the first presentation, Chair, just a question on the single ticketing system. Where is that going to be implemented? Will it? Which provinces are going to be looking at that? Is it a pilot or is it an actual rollout across the country? That's the first presentation. Thank you, Chair. Then to Dr. Mampo Modise, thank you very much. It seems that you are Treasury's hospital pass candidate whenever there's a tough presentation to give and something that requires a bit of hard work. Dr. Modise, it gets landed on you, so thank you for that. I noted the interpretation of the section 30.1 of the PFMA, sorry, 30.2, where you focus specifically on two lines of it, and you say that money to be appropriated for expenditure already announced by the minister during the tabling of the annual budget. So in terms of your reading of that line and in isolation and separate from the other lines within section 30.2, it indicates that the minister during their budget can pretty much promise whatever he likes in terms of an adjustment budget, and we kind of have to deliver on it, or you certainly as Treasury need to deliver on it, which makes the significant and unforeseeable component, which is mentioned in the first part of the of section 30.2, a lot less dominant in terms of that. So, I mean, if you juxtapose that with the fact that our previous minister made very strong statements about the public wages and said that, you know, we will not allow public wages to exceed, et cetera, those promises to the public have been largely ignored. And of course, we made a wage settlement much higher than what was expected. But now, if the minister makes an irresponsible, and so I presume that the government then feels that that was an irresponsible statement, and the rest of the cabinet chose to go against it. But now, if the minister makes an irresponsible statement, which is to the benefit of people in the inner circle, does that mean that we need to have an adjustment appropriation bill quite suddenly? Because the reality is that the SIA, South African Post Office, and the Land Bank expenditure is certainly not unforeseeable. We've all seen it coming from a mile away, and yeah, a little bit disappointing that we see the need for those bailouts. So in terms of the three bailouts, yeah, I have questions which I think we'll probably deal with through the process as we go on. Certainly when we get to the public participation. I'm not going to unpack it too deeply now. In terms of the adjustment budget, though, there's nothing really on the source of funds. And I wanted to just hear about the source of the funds that are going to be funding this adjustment. And it appears to me that there's largely two sources of the funds. The first one is the over revenue or the increased revenue collection by SARS. Well done, thank you very much. The second is an under expenditure on the SRD grant through Social Development Department. And I really want to talk about the conditions on the SRD grant and whether those conditions are actually realistic in terms of the needs of the people on the ground. If we're giving the budget to the department and they're not able to spend it, we need to understand why. The next question, of course, is on the political party funding model or funding amount that's being spent there, which I also find is a little bit questionable, and I don't think people expect me to question it, because I think my party will probably also benefit from it. But the reality is that this is a time when we are struggling to find money to perform the most basic responsibilities of government, I think is possibly a little bit distasteful. And I wonder if really this is just something to make up for the failure of the previous Treasurer General of the African National Congress, which was necessitated his advancement to Deputy President level. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Ryder. The next one, Honorable Fanny Titoit. Mr. Jesus.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Also appreciate the presentations. Treasury, thank you for the effort that you put in there. Chair, a lot has been said. I won't be that long, but important questions has been posed up to now. Chair, I'm going to start with the Division of Revenue Bill and focus on the Land Bank just for a moment. In the previous engagements that we had with the Land Bank before the new board was appointed and all that, and afterwards as well, it was clear that Land Bank has a certain objective that they need to fulfill. And in our last engagement with Land Bank, it was also made clear that Land Bank will keep on focusing on its objective, even even while their business plan is flawed, according to me. Because when you turn away about 50% of your paying customers to focus on another goal in assisting upcoming farmers and not necessarily generating sufficient revenue to keep the boat afloat, it's evident that the Land Bank will be in a downward spiral from then on. And that is where we find ourselves now. So my question to National Treasury is with regards to the fact that Land Bank is focusing on, is not necessarily focusing on generating revenue. When do you anticipate will government be in a position or needed or called upon again to assist with another bailout? And do you think that this will be a constant event that's going to take place on a regular basis? When we go to the first presentation, page 10 at education with 1.6 billion rand for ECD. Last year, we heard that the additional allocations that were given to ECD was to address the financial support towards caregivers, but I couldn't see anything in the presentation referring to that. I want to know if there might be a certain part of the 1.6 billion that will be allocated towards that as well, for the money, all the money not necessarily going towards the education of the children, but for remuneration of caregivers. Page 11, agriculture, no funding for disaster relief for commercial farmers. And since a lot of them incurred damages during the recent floods and then the fires before that and other pests before that, is there any allocation that's going to go towards commercial farmers, support of farmers in general, and excluding the upcoming farmers as stipulated on page 11? Page 16, then, my last point, so can National Treasury perhaps provide us with a detailed breakdown of all the grants and allocations to all municipalities per province, to enable us to circulate that to councillors, to basically empower them to conduct their oversight role more efficiently and see to it that the funds that they deal with is captured in the budget, etc. It's just for a better oversight role. Thank you, Chair. That's all from me at this stage.
Thank you, Honorable Dutoit. Honorable Karim, you next.
Chairperson, I've also got load shedding and quite a thing. Firstly, I think your original input, setting almost like a framework for the discussion was very good, actually. You picked up on the key issues. But there's also something else. Two of the three issues I wanted to raise have been covered, so I won't go there. But see, it was raised in the fiscal framework report that we cannot see. You see, basically, the government has economic policy or a framework for an economic policy. The budget is meant to speak to that. Now, with the fiscal framework, we ask this question: where's the master plan of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan? Like we present these plans, and then we can't see how the budget links to it. Like we can't see how the budget links to the NDP, right? And yesterday and this morning, today in the House, well, we didn't sort of deal with the length, but our report adopted yesterday talks about the need for, a look at this. I don't think it should be the NA committee alone. One of the quarterly things, I think Lobalo and Inkolek on them have to understand, have to raise with the committee on that side that we do it together. Now, the division of revenue should also speak to that. It should also speak to what extent what we're doing or seeking to do with this bill is within the framework of the ERRP. And on special appropriations, it's a matter, that could apply to other special appropriations. We've always been calling for conditions. And we welcome the fact that Treasury now is more and more putting conditions. It should have come sooner. Parliament has been raising this for a while. You will recall, Chair, on the NA side, we raised it around 2015, 2016. So now we have these conditions. But if you look at the money allocated to ESCOM, right, which we will look at more carefully, obviously, in appropriations, and less in the division of revenue, but it's the same thing. And we must discuss that. The conditions set have to also be discussed. In other words, we agree that you don't just give money without ensuring that the money is used for what it is allocated. Moreover, there's a plan to implement efficiently and effectively the program that's linked to the allocation, the appropriation that's in the bill. We agree with all that, but there's a major turnaround that is being suggested in the ESCOM bill. And it veers towards privatization without a proper discussion about how far you go in doing that, or how far you use a variety of forms of private sector partnerships and inputs. We need the private sector like never before. But there are plethora of forms of ensuring the private sector participates, secures its profits, but also, in the same breath, contributes towards the development of our country. And when you think of water and electricity, as many of us will hold in the majority party, those are basic services. So I think, when some of us were arguing for conditions, we didn't mean this far. And it's almost like privatization by stealth, giving the money and then saying, right, we hand over the power stations that are not working to the private sector. You only hand them over as a complete last resort after you've pursued other options of private sector participation. And it's in the self-interest of the private sector, as you see repeatedly. I was looking this morning, Chairperson, at the TV screen. If I pick this up, I think it's Checkers or ShopRite, call it what you will, are saying they're substantially declining in profits. And it's the same story from the private sector. If you look at what the private sector is saying to Transnet, we are prepared to run this thing. My daughter had to go for some NGO to Pongola, KZN, and she phoned me. And she said, Dad, there's scores and scores of trucks that are just stationary that are trying to get in Richards Bay Port. She was coming from the other direction, mercifully. She was just stunned, actually. I don't know how she got there. Maybe she took some other route or something to get there. When she came back, that's what she saw. And it's true, we can't continue like with a complete 100% state ownership. It's foolhardy, Chairperson. One can't be like ideologically dogmatic. But at the same time, we can't hand over Transnet to the private sector. We can find a variety of forms of partnerships. So I'm just saying, Chairperson, conditions shouldn't lead to like a complete ideological turnaround unless there's a fuller discussion around that. And so when letting Treasury that, I think both appropriations committees have to be very careful about conditions. It never struck me that the conditions will go in this sort of direction. But we'll come to that point again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Karim. Honorable Randall from Gauteng.
Thank you, Chairperson, and also let me just appreciate the presentations. It means a lot to us in the provinces to participate. And thank you, Chairperson, for always inviting us. It's really time and well spent with colleagues in the national sphere of government. So my first question and my first comment would be that I find it very strange that National Treasury to date has not think about an information and communications technology conditional grant. Now, being from Gauteng, we are the economic hub of South Africa. We haven't seen it. In Africa and in South Africa, digital opportunities are large and it's growing. And we note the Gauteng Department of E-Government struggling because of budgetary constraints to roll out. We are now in trouble already with the rolling out of phase 2 of the Gauteng broadband network. Now, township entrepreneurs, especially our unemployed youth, we note that there's a lot of regulatory barriers that continue to cripple the current and future growth potential that the digital economy can achieve. And we can also see that potentially it can result in generating additional revenue to our country's fiscus. So my question would be one of, we are already, busy with new skills, robotics, artificial intelligence. Why has there never been consideration for an ICT grant? Maybe if National Treasury could consider, in future budgets to come and pilot it in Gauteng, so that we can roll it out properly for our residents in our township and SMME in Gauteng and boost the digital economy. The second question, my colleague Dennis Ryder also mentioned it earlier, the Kruger SEZ. Previous financial years, a lot was made of the Vaal River SEZ. And one wonders with the BFI support to Kruger SEZ, I'm just curious to find out what is the status of the Vaal River SEZ currently from a national perspective. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Can I now hand over to invite Honorable Ndabe from Eastern Cape? Honorable Ndabe.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and good evening to you, and good evening to all honorable members in the meeting, and the officials from National Treasury, and all the officials from the meeting. Thanks very much once more, Honorable Chair, for extending the invitation to us as chairpersons of provinces. We really appreciate the opportunity to have this direct interface and engagement with yourselves and the National Treasury. Honorable Chair, I just have a few questions. Majority of my questions have already been asked by honorable members. One is the issue around the housing emergency grant that has been taken. My question would be that, was there any study conducted before this decision is taken? Because I'm also of the view that how would a National Department of Human Settlements sitting in Pretoria know an emergency housing need in the local municipality of Tabangulu in the Eastern Cape? I'm just making an example. Why are you taking the funds far away from the people? And what will be the access requirement for such funds to be accessed? Because the reality is that the demand or the backlog for housing is very huge, especially in provinces like Eastern Cape. Now, I'm raising this because I'm asking a question to say, was there any consideration before that decision was made? And also, was there any assessment of the backlog, leave the emergency component, before such a decision was taken? The second question, Honorable Chair, that I would be interested to know is the issue of the infrastructure grant. I raised the issue when we were interacting with the Minister of Finance post the presentation of the broad budget presentation in Parliament. What is the view of the National Treasurer in consideration of the historic infrastructure backlog in provinces where they know that they've got historic backlog? I made this example, for instance, in the Eastern Cape, where what was then called a ACID, accelerated of the removal of the mud schools, where we're dealing with the historic mud schools, especially in the Eastern Cape. I raised that question in relation to the state of affairs of our hospitals in the province, the health infrastructure, given the budget allocation, commitment on the medical legal claims, and all other health constraining matters. What is stopping Treasury to have this infrastructure backlog facility similar to ACID to address provinces that have got this historic backlog on infrastructure, especially as it relates to health infrastructure? In this context, I'll be making an example about the Eastern Cape, where I come from. The third issue, Honorable Chair, will be about this 31 billion allocated for wage increase, which then 10 billion will be allocated this current financial year. But the allocation formula that is presented is that they'll be using the equitable allocation formula. My question is that why are they not using the actual numbers? Because by now we should know how many employees in government we have per province. Why would they use equitable formula instead of allocating by head in terms of the officials, the employees that we have in our government system in provinces? So that will be, because my view is that provinces are not the same. And what informs that formula given instead of focusing on the numbers? The third issue that I would be interested, or the fourth issue that I would be interested in, Honorable Chair, is that in the presentation of the Minister of Finance in Parliament, there was an issue mentioned about the allocation of Umzimvubu Dam, which is a long-awaited project in the province of the Eastern Cape, of course, driven nationally. I wanted to see, because I was trying to look into the figures allocated into this presentation. How much does it allocated to that project to start as announced by the minister, as well as the submission we made that there should be a steering committee that guides the project between National Treasury and the vis-a-vis a long-awaited discussion on the establishment of the state bank. I see that post office is retrenching employees. Now the presentation is that the post office must then sell some of its non-core, as it is mentioned, assets to recapitalize and to generate revenue. What is the ideal state of us as government with the post office versus the establishment of the state bank? Would not think that in the future we'll need those assets that we are selling when we really full roll out the establishment of the state bank as it is envisaged. I did articulate my views around the issue of the state bank in the meeting we had with the FFC, and that discussion can't be postponed any longer. I share similar views of the issue around the Transnet and all other entities of state that we can't really hand over to private sector because of our own inefficiencies as government. That include SAA. I know that there's recapitalization, there's a bringing in of a private equity partner as part of the re-engineering of the SAA, but it's different from selling a state-owned company. Bringing in a private equity partner is different from selling the state-owned entity. So I wanted to understand from the point of view of Treasury about all these state-owned companies and their future endeavors as it relates to us as government intervening as a development state. Thank you very much, Honorable.
Thank
you very much.
Honorable Mkiva, you're next.
No, manibulele kakhulu sihlalo ngokuhlwa nje ndithathe lithuba ndibulise kuwe ndibulise kuwe onke amalungu alendlu ibekekileyo ndibulise kumagosa aphuma pha kwisebe elijongene nezezimali kweli lizwe kakunye namanye amagosa ke akhoyo alapha eParliament. Mhlali ngaphambili kwelami icala ndicinga into yobana amalungu amaninzi seye ndisithe umhlana kwizinto ebendizawuzama ugxininisa kuzo. Mhlawumbi ke kuba selitshonile ilanga ndivumele ke uba mhlawumbi ndiboleke kweli lwimi lomlungu ukulungiselela isininzi samalungu. I would like to start off with a question that relates to a much needed focus in the rural communities of our country when it comes to the much needed infrastructure investment from basic needs, but foregrounding the issue of the roads. Can't the National Treasury in this regard really set aside some resources so that we have roads that can be upgraded into tar roads in our rural communities? This is a long outstanding issue that the rural communities must never be seen as a secondary or as something that looks like it's a different country. You know, we need to be deliberate about bringing that kind of an investment, starting with the roads. Of course, so much work went in the earlier years of the rapid electrification, which saw the majority of our areas being electrified. Can't we have the same approach of a rapid, infrastructure investment insofar as ensuring that we are tarring all, particularly the provincial roads, and then we can then look at those strategic access roads as well. I know that we are a unitary state and government might have different levels, but I think we need to be deliberate in order to bring those people who are in the periphery into the center of the economy. This is something that is going to be a very big challenge for South Africa if it is not attended. And this thing of maintaining gravel roads year by year is actually equal to wasteful expenditure, because we do the road this month, 2 months down the line, heavy downpour of rainfalls come in, they wash that road, and we have spent almost 20 million. I think we need to be strategic. It is, there is a saying in English that says, cheap buying is expensive. This thing of doing the gravel roads is really, in that context, it is equal to cheap buying, because we end up spending 20 million times 3 in one financial year doing the same road, instead of having a long-term view of saying we rather spend 300 million upgrading that road so that it becomes a tar road, and therefore the maintenance becomes much more cheaper when you look in terms of the medium term, long term. Secondly, the same principle applies in terms of the running water into this area. Water is life and it is a necessity. It is important that we have some kind of a rapid strategy of ensuring that we roll out these water services and the sanitations for these communities. Yes, there has been a great amount of infrastructure that has been installed in these rural provinces. But I want to tell you that when the water pipes are there and the taps are there, but they are dry. They are not dry because there's no water. They are dry simply because that there is inefficacy in the system of plugging into the water grid so that water goes into those communities. It is something that we need to attend to. Is it an issue of resources that are kept at a particular point that they cannot make us to be able to do this thing? Thirdly, there is a colleague that spoke about the issue of connectivity. The issue of connectivity is quite very, very bad, particularly for rural communities. Imagine that more than half of the schools, primary schools and even high schools in South Africa are still located in rural communities. They are not connected. What does that say to us? So I'm saying the National Treasury must answer that question, that they must also make it very deliberate that we must begin to invest in laying the fiber throughout and across the rural communities of our country, so that that connectivity can help the public facilities like schools, clinics, as well as social development and other social services, so that there's easy access for our people to service delivery. So this issue of connectivity is really, it has become really very central in terms of the development of our communities. If a community is not connected, then it is left into wilderness. So this is definitely an issue that must be prioritized. Secondly, I come from the Eastern Cape, as Honorable Ndabeni had just spoken here. We are endowed in the Eastern Cape with the oceans economy. We would like also, and we have 800 stretch of the seaboard in our province, and which is the longest in the whole country. That area remains underdeveloped, and we require an intervention because a very strategic area, you know, from the river to the sea, this belongs to us as the natives of this country, and therefore it can't be relegated to the background. Time has come that we strike a balance between the wealth in the hinterland and the wealth in the oceans. So it's very important that there is this corridor of developing the coastal line, but it is moving slowly as the Honorable Ndabeni was referring to the Mzimvubu project. That thing has been spoken to for many, many years, more than 10 years ago, but we are not really moving on that. And therefore, if the Treasury can really help us to ensure that, because it would be a game changer, and it would actually upscale the performance of our economy, because it will create jobs, the much needed jobs, and it will help in the poverty alleviation and so on and so forth. So Chairperson, I will leave it at that. I entered this platform very late simply because of the load shedding. I hope I'm not repeating anyone who has said what I'm saying. If I do, then you must take my contribution as a point of emphasis. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mkiva. Honorable members, there's a reason why I allowed members to engage, take this much time as they could, because I understand the importance and of the bills before us, and I understand the importance of the contribution by the members. Also, the contribution that comes from the provinces are really valued. So coming to this meeting, compromising, I know you have been busy since early hours of the morning, and now you're still in a meeting, but it's worth doing it because we are responsible for the pace of the country. When I presented my questions, I left two of my questions to say, I hope any member might have an interest in raising them, or might have seen that there's a necessity to raise them. But those two questions, others have been raised, but those two questions are not raised. Before I hand over to Team Treasurer Osmadi Jengli, Dr. Mamudisi, I have these questions to you as Team Treasurer. No, with regards to the public transport network grant, I just want to know as to what were the specific reasons that led to the City of Cape Town to revisit their implementation plan, if any. So it's a direct question that talks to transport, but specifically the revisiting of the implementation by the City of Cape Town. I think it's linked to what the Honorable Honorable Mkiva has raised in terms of the transport in rural areas, and also what Honorable Ryder has raised in as far as the e-tolls. So there are several issues. Many members have raised that, but this one I just wanted to add to what they have raised, but specifically on the angle of the City of Cape Town. And not leaving out, I've hoped that from Mpumalanga we will have one. I saw Ms. Gladys Milazi. I don't know if she's alone because the changes, maybe there's a new chairperson. The chairperson that we knew is no more in the legislature. But I think it will be a standing matter, the issue of Moloto Rail. It has not been raised at any platform, and it looks like it has been forgotten. It might have been forgotten by us who are here, and those technocrats and the advisors of the politicians, the executive, but the people down there, they have not forgotten about it. They're still awaiting. They're still hoping that they will see their dream, their wish being delivered. The other thing also that I wanted to raise, the last question, is what are the consequences in terms of the management of cities that have reportedly underspent on this very same conditional grant, the one that I've spoken about, the transport network grant. So on this one, it includes City of Tshwane, City of Cape Town, Ekurhuleni, eThekwini, George, Nelson Mandela, Polokwane, and Rustenburg. So I would like you to unpack, to make us understand. There were also emphasis from members about the functionality of the municipalities, collection of revenue, the way they're working, whether the meter readings and all that, but the services that they are giving to the people, it's a nightmare. It has been a nightmare, and ever since we started in 2019, getting reports, getting presentations from FFC and stuff, we have been stressed about, and it's an open secret that municipalities are pulling on a log. What is it that is being done? But we know that it's not the land function as treasurer, but you are allocating money. Before you allocate money, we need to be convinced that there's a need, there's a plan, we have professional or skilled people, the capacity is going to be able, that is there in the municipality, will be able to give the end receivers who are the people, the community members, the quality service, not just service for the sake of doing it or playing with the numbers and make us be convinced that money has been spent, whereas the money that has been spent is not tallying with the quality of the service that has been given to the people. I'll leave it at that. Honorable members, thank you so much for your questions, for engaging with the presentations. Oh, load shedding. I hope I'm still audible. Asmari Jeng and your team, can you respond, Team Treasury?
Thank you, Chair. Mampo will start.
Thanks, Memedi Jeng. Thanks, Chair. So just for my questions, I think the first one I want to respond to, Honorable Ryder, is the issue that you raised on section 32. Basically, if you look at the appropriation bill, which I shared on my screen, the way we get this authorization is section 6 of the PFMA. So if Parliament does not see fit that what we have in this appropriation bill does not cater for what you are worried about, then of course Parliament has the powers to change it and put it such a way that it covers the worries that you have. So it is not the reason why we would put such a clause in the appropriations bill is because if, for example, the expenditure that the minister cannot defray and they have economic impact, this section will allow him to disperse funds, but it always says we need to come back to Parliament to get Parliament's approval. If Parliament does not agree with the proposed allocations that are in the bill, Parliament can, of course, make a determination that those allocations should not be done. So the changes here will allow Parliament to this section, you can go over it, and if there are things that you think we need to amend, such proposals will form part of the bigger changes, then of course we will amend it such that it lessens the stress of minister just approving things that are not part of what you think is critical. So that's the first point I wanted to bring to your attention. And I mean, over the past couple of years, this section has been used to deal with spending that has not been yet finalized, and we are still waiting for specific decisions to be made. Therefore, we use this provision, but it's not a provision that we would want to use for any other random allocations. So if we put something, if minister puts something on his speech that is not yet allocated, is mainly because either work is still going on or decisions are still pending or negotiations are still taking place. The other questions, Chairperson, on the post office, I think the balance that Treasury needs to have is how do we assist an entity that is struggling but making sure that we safeguard the finances. I mean, I appreciate that putting conditions has been welcomed by Parliament, which is what we were hoping for. And this time around, we have very strict conditions. So we are asking the Post Office to tell us what is it that they have done to deal with financial misconduct between the 1st of April 2019 to the third quarter of this fiscal year. Now, unfortunately, Chairperson, even if I wanted to, I can't go fire a board of an entity. I mean, I'm a treasury official. The only thing that I can do is to propose to my minister and to cabinet that if, and to parliament, of course, if the entity does not meet the specified conditions, they should not be allowed to receive the money. So the allocation is the muscle that Treasury will have. Of course, that must be backed by Parliament. So the reason why we bring these conditions to your attention for you to consider is so that once you are agreeing that the entities must do the following before they get funding, the only way for me as a Treasury official to enforce the discipline in the system is through using of these conditions and not to transfer the funds. However, honorable members, what is critical is that if you don't transfer the funds because an entity does not meet the conditions, that also creates other problems because it means the situation is going to become worse. If they were not paying people salaries, it means they will continue not to pay the salary. So I want the committee to also consider what happens if Treasury is enforcing these conditions that would have been approved by Parliament. But of course, what we were using as Treasury is we're using these conditions, and the transfers, most of the times we do the transfers in tranches. So we will say to the entity, these are your preconditions or pre-disbursements conditions. Before you even get a cent, this is what you need to do. And then we give you the first tranche. And then from this point to the next point, these are the milestones, this is what we want to see. And then we give you the next tranche. So what we have learned in the past is that we gave the post office money and said, go and implement your turnaround plan. But we didn't discuss with them the milestones. We didn't give them the money in tranches so that they can only get it after they achieve milestones. So we are introducing that now to avoid a situation where we come back to Parliament and say they were unable to use or they were unable to implement the turnaround plan. The issue of selling assets of the post office, while I understand the assets may be used for something else, the problem right now is that they are not being used and they're incurring unnecessary costs that government cannot afford. It is only critical for the post office if they implement their turnaround plan. They have identified the post office of tomorrow. I think it is also something that Chairperson and honorable members, you must consider is to actually ask the post office to come and present their turnaround plan or their strategy of tomorrow so that you can at least see what this 2.4 billion will be funding. But basically, the way in which they have designed the strategy is such that there will be non-core assets that are not going to be used. If we can look at those assets and not have dormant assets that are depreciating in value, then there is no harm in government getting market value for those properties because the post office is not using those assets. And this is not the first time, honorable members, we are pushing state-owned companies to sell these non-core assets. Even other entities were the conditions, even for Denel, the condition is that you need to start disposing of your non-core assets. There's no point in keeping assets, but you are not self-sustainable. It doesn't make sense. So you need to either you need a combination of getting help from the fiscals, but also you need as an entity to rise above your problems and start getting yourself out of the problem and not solely depend on the fiscals, and disposing of your assets that you no longer use. It's part of the strategy that we need to consider as the state. And this is something that it won't harm the strategy that they're putting forward. It enhances the strategy that they're putting forward. Chairperson, the comment regarding the agency of the bill, this is not, this second adjustments bill, it is not the same as the normal appropriation bill. The normal appropriation bill there's provisions in the law that allows the departments to spend money until the 31st of July before the appropriation bill is enacted. So the timelines, you're right, are in law. For this particular bill, we are trying to resolve funding pressures for these entities where we're trying to resolve funding pressures for these entities where we still have revenue overruns for this year. If we don't deal with them and avoid the call, I mean, last year, the same committee required us to fund the post office. We were sent back to go and look for money for the post office. So we basically using the money that we have in this year to try and resolve the problem instead of taking the problem and bringing it to next year. So the reason why this bill is different and it's smaller is precisely because we are just trying to use resources that we have this year to deal with the problems now that can be dealt with now instead of postponing the problems in the future. The funding for this bill, yes, Honorable Rider, is a combination between the revenue overruns and also some of the underspending in different departments. I think when we come back to report on the Appropriations Act, I will bring more details on the SRD. But in short, basically what we have done, Honorable Rider, is that when we introduced this grant during COVID, there was no time for us to put in place efficiency measures. So the criteria that was used was if you're unemployed, then you get the grant. What we didn't have in place was for people who work in the informal sector that are not registered. The people in the informal sector that do part-time work, and we also didn't anticipate that there will be people in the system. Unfortunately, the people are always there who take advantage of the system. We didn't anticipate that there will be people who have multiple bank accounts and they will use the bank account that doesn't receive income to try and get the grant. Now, what then happened was that we then, with the Department of Social Development, we looked at what Cabinet has instructed us to do. We were instructed to make sure that we only give the grant to people who deserve the grant. We do not give the grant to people who are misusing the system. Therefore, what we then did with the Department of Social Development was to come up with criteria that will help us deal with inclusion errors. When I say inclusion errors, I mean having people in the system who do not deserve the grant. By contracting banks, the problem that we dealt with, which was a big problem, was we then had an opportunity to link people to multiple bank accounts. If you then take out the people who have multiple bank accounts who were benefiting from the grant, you will get significant savings that are going to come through. Then the second thing that we had to look at was, because during COVID, we didn't have time and it was an emergency, we couldn't do what we call an income test. So what we then did, because now we had time, the administrative of how we disperse the grant were sorted out. Then we looked at how do we then decide on who deserves the grant and how do we then check for income. Through the banks again, we then make a decision that we're going to introduce an income test where if you have in any of the bank account or combined bank accounts, you have an income or money that is above the food poverty line, then you do not benefit from the SRD grant. When you put efficiencies in place, then you realize savings. Unfortunately, the language that we use is underspending. But if you look at the fact that we have been trying to improve the system and only have people that need the grant in the system, then we realize efficiency gains. And these are the efficiency gains that we move money from to try and deal with pressures in the system somewhere else. So this is not the Department of Social Development inability to pay for the grants or to give the people who deserve the grants the money that they deserve. This is a pure efficiency introduction in the system to make sure that only the people who deserve the grant are the people who end up getting the grant. Chairperson, the comments on Umzimvubu and on the ESCOM, I think we didn't bring the team that deals with the ESCOM because ESCOM, it has its own bill that will be tabled in Parliament, and when that bill is tabled, I'm sure the team will definitely be here to answer all the questions. And in terms of Umzimvubu, the money that will be allocated, so between National Treasury, the Department of Water and Sanitation, the Infrastructure Fund, the budget for infrastructure, BFI, budget facility for infrastructure, there will be allocations that are given for Umzimvubu, and the department has revised the scope to different chunks that are fundable and are implementable, and funding will definitely be allocated then. And when we discuss the appropriation bill, I will bring the exact numbers of how much will be allocated for which year and for what purpose that needs to be allocated the money for. Thank you so much, Chair. I hope I would, oh, sorry, Chairperson. The last question is the question on e-tolls. The way in which the decision for e-tolls was made, it was a discussion, it was a political discussion. Then we had technical discussions to try and implement a political decision that was made. The political decision that was made was what the minister announced in his medium-term budget policy statement, was that the Gauteng province will pay 30% of the GFIP debt, which is 43 billion. The national will take the 70% of the debt. The province will then either, depending on what they want to do, the decision was left to the province. If the province wants to use e-tolls to pay for the maintenance, it was up to them whether they will use the e-tolls to pay for the maintenance or not. If they have other revenue sources outside of the e-tolls that they can use to do the maintenance, that's their decision. That's what they can do if they don't want to use e-tolls. Then the other contentious proposal that was on the table was the payment of the, it was what do we then do if the province decides that they're not going to use e-tolls and they're going to scrap e-tolls. What do we then do with the people that have already paid for the e-toll? That debt, I think now is about 6 billion. The two proposals that were there were, it is easier to collect the money from people who were not paying than to reimburse the people that have already paid, because one, administratively is going to be very difficult. I mean, how do you pay back the person who used AVs and paid the e-tolls? How would you find them? I mean, the complications are a lot. So those were the two options that were given to the province, and the province, I mean, as you will aware, they then announced that they're going to repay or refund the people who were paying e-tolls in the past. Because the province made that decision, then the assumption would be they would have had identified where they're going to get the money to reimburse the people who would have paid for the e-tolls. Therefore, in these two bills, even in the appropriation bill, when we bring it, there is no additional allocation for the province to deal with the e-toll debt because of the understanding that they will use their own revenue sources to deal with the maintenance and to deal with the rest of the debt and to repay the people who were paying e-tolls in the past. Chairperson, thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's next?
So I'll ask Khali maybe to comment on some of the provincial specific questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honorable members. Good evening to everyone. I'll start with the Izinduna one. So I'll answer both in terms of why KZN and also how did the ideas come about. So I'll start with a bit of history to say. So the discussion around the remuneration of head men and head women, that's what they are called. So the Izinduna term, we got it from KZN, but generally in the traditional and Khoisan Act, Yatikele Act, so traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act, we have head men and head women in that regard. So the discussion around that started in 2011 by the Independent Commission on Remuneration for Public Office Bearers, I think led by Judge Siriti at the time, in terms of the remuneration of this leadership, the traditional leadership, because members will be aware that that commission deals with the traditional leadership remuneration for kings, queens, senior traditional leaders, the chiefs, and others. So this is another cohort that they added to that. So the discussion were with provinces in terms of affordability, because some of them, like KZN, they were paying a stipend of 1,200 per month, and then the commission is proposing that provinces, especially the rural provinces, pay salary. They pay salary to this group. So to cut the long story short, and then the president signed the proclamation in 2014 after much deliberation of provinces raising the issue of budgets, that to say, look, we'll not be able to afford this. And it was, in terms of the proclamation, provinces were to implement from 1 April 2013. So in the case of KZN, the reason they were the only province that did not immediately implement this. All other provinces implemented, therefore they did not have a budget pressure in this regard to the head men and head women. So how the areas came about with regards to compensation. So after much discussion within the province, they started paying the Izinduners or head men and head women from 15 December 2016. So which meant that they had arrears that they needed to pay. They still have to pay between April 2013 and November 2016. That's how the arrears came about. And due to the budget cuts, due to members will recall that prior to census 2011, KZN in terms of population was the biggest province in terms of numbers at the time, but after 2011, so they were the second biggest, so therefore they lost quite a bit of money, so their budget kind of shrank and they were not able to afford, hence they came to national government to assist in this regard. So it answers both questions. So with regards to the second one, any funding that address medical legal, in this regard, there's no specific funding for medical legal. Provincial departments of health just prioritize from their own budgets and from time to time, other provincial treasuries assist with additional funding, particularly adjustment if there are too much pressures. But we hope that I think the latest court judgment in Umtata that has ruled that that province doesn't have to pay a lump sum to the claimant. It will create a precedent that then they pay periodically in terms of the claims moving forward. The process of shifting ECD from social development to education has already happened. The implementation of that is started from 1 April 2022, both at national and provincial spheres of government. So that process has been concluded. The own revenue in provinces, yes, in aggregate, the own revenue accounts for 3% of the total provincial revenue. So at this point, it's above at 20 billion, I think we're around 22 billion in terms of that total. And we must say that members, COVID also did affect the collection, especially your motor vehicle licenses. They're trying to catch up because they still have a population of cars that are not they're not licensed, and we've been giving them data in terms of to follow up on that one. But in our view, we believe that the province have done really well, particularly from 2016. They had the revenue enhancing strategies that they were implementing. So and the reason maybe you don't see big growth on motor vehicle is because the problem that we had previously was that while other provinces were increasing maybe higher than others, that's when you will see that, let's say the rental cars, you'll see majority of cars in Gauteng, the AVs or others with registration Eastern Cape, because it was cheaper to register in Eastern Cape. So what we have done working with them, we have kind of standardized the motor vehicle fees across provinces. So they just increase tariffs at an inflation every year. So in our view, we believe that especially of motor vehicle license, they are doing well, but there are obviously others that are not collecting to their maximum potential. On the SCZ, the reason that the only one that got money is because they did apply to BFI, but there is a SCZ fund at DIC that all SCZs can apply to and get funding from there. So on the ECD, I'll try to attempt it, the caregivers at the centers. So in terms of the ECD that moved from the ECD, the caregivers, so that money I think has specific in terms of what is it funding, but I believe that it probably can, but I don't have an answer on this one in terms of whether the caregivers will receive this one. On the health infrastructure, why not have health backlog grant for provinces? So in this one, the National Department, what it has done, it has gone through across provinces, identified backlogs. They do have a plan that they've been trying to discuss with National Treasury in terms of to find a way forward to find it across all provinces, so that don't find a situation where we've got backlogs in one province and the other. So I think in that regard, a way forward will be found soon in that regard. Thank you, Member Regine, and thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Khali. Jan, on the municipal performance, the ones that you picked up.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Good evening to the members. I'm going to try and assist with the response on what we do to assist municipalities broadly. Chairperson, what the Treasury normally do is firstly we have issued a set of regulations. To date, since the implementation of the Public Finance Management Act, we've issued 9 regulations. We have issued 123 circulars based on questions and demand from municipalities to guide them. Chairperson, all this documents is on our website. We have developed guidelines and we have done extensive training for municipalities on the number of areas. Chair, the Division of Revenue Bill essentially contained, if you look at the slide presented by my colleague, about 164 billion rand. That's 96.5 billion for the equitable share and about 52 billion rand for conditional grants. Chair, the point I want to make is that a lot of critique has been expressed that the share of local government is very small. And if you look at the slide, it shows on average about 10.1%. Chair, that does not constitute the overall budget for local government. And therefore, I think we need to progressively change the debate, because if you take the overall budget for municipalities that the Treasury annually publish, if you look at the 164 billion and you look at the overall budget is about 550 billion rand. So, Chair, that means the sector, the local government sphere, have to their disposal on average between 24 and 26 as the resource envelope. So I think it's an important point that we need to make when the discussion about underfunding or local government is not sufficiently funded, because what we do as a Treasury, we publish the consolidated numbers for local government for all 257 municipalities. Therefore, if you look at revenue, it's constituting the equitable share, conditional grants, but municipal owned revenue. And this is where it's completely the opposite of what we've seen in the provincial sphere, the 97% versus the 3% revenue. In this case is exactly the opposite. Chair, we do not deny the fact that there is municipalities that do not have sufficient revenue, but in the slide where we show you the redistributive nature of a DORA, proportionally, we do compensate the rural municipalities proportionally higher. And I think it's important that that is also recognized. Chairperson, we do acknowledge that overarching local government is the portfolio or fall under the portfolio of the Ministry of Kokta. However, Chair, what is important for the committees and the members to know, financial management is the Treasury's constitutional mandate. And we are responsible for financial management across all 3 spheres of government, as per the Public Finance Management Act, as per the Municipal Finance Management Act, and as per the Division of Revenue Act. Chair, when the real problem that we're trying to solve in the space of local government is the budget challenge. Many of our municipalities, Chair, live beyond their means. Because we've got a accrual budgeting system, it's completely different from how the budget process works for national provinces. Because in this case, your revenue depends on the bills that you issue for the services rendered to the community. So, Chairperson, that problem is something that we're trying to arrest, because if we don't deal with that decisively, we will forever have municipalities that have cash flow challenges. And just for the benefit of a committee, last year when we've assessed the budgets, and we do it religiously, Chair, as a service to local government, the National Treasury assessed the budgets of the 17 big cities, and our provincial counterparts do it for the delegated municipalities. But Chair, the numbers of unfunded budgets, as the previous cycle was 112. We have managed to bring that down to 106 municipalities. So this is an extensive process where we assess the budgets prior to the municipalities tabling it in council and finally adopting it by the council so that progressively we deal with this challenge. Chairperson, the second thing that we have done, we've issued 2 budget circulars annually. We normally issue one in December, early December, and after the national budget, we have issued a second budget circular. And that is essentially to give guidance to municipalities what they should consider taking into account when they formulate their budgets. So extensive guidelines. And Chair, in the circular, we also deal very decisively with how the Division of Revenue Act monitoring and oversight process will be managed, including if there's unspent grants. So there's a very specific process that we've institutionalized over time to manage this in a responsible manner, and also to make sure the municipalities know the rules of the game upfront. Chairperson, the Treasury have, in addition to all these other initiatives, we have introduced a revenue management program. And the key pillars of that program is about the funded budget issue. Secondly, we've done extensive research work and development work on cost-reflective tariffs. And we have designed the tools, and we progressively training municipalities of the inputs that they have to consider when they formulate their budget and the tariffs that they then charge for services rendered. Linked to that, Chair, is soon we're going to issue a transversal tender on prepaid meters, because the smaller municipalities, Chair, struggle to formulate their procurement policies and processes. And by putting a transversal tender in place, the municipalities will then be able to piggyback on that process and participate in order to help them to deal with smart meters, to deal with their revenue challenges. And all of this, Chair, is associated with support and extensive training. In addition to that, Chairperson, I'm sure that the members know that we have the Financial Management Improvement Program. And basically what it translates to is that we put advisors in provincial treasuries and in municipalities to then work through those instruments or that vehicles to help municipalities almost daily by actually putting people there that can assist them. So, Chairperson, from a capacity building perspective, or the new terminology that we use, capability assessment, is to really try and help municipalities to do their monthly bank reconciliations, all the things that matter, all the controls that the Auditor General talk about, supply chain management. There's a division in the Treasury that also look after that. So, Chairperson, I think with regard to the question on the allocations, so Honourable Chair, we not only put the schedules that support the Division of Revenue Bill on the website, we each year, based on the request of Parliament, issue specific allocation letters to each and every municipality to summarize their equitable share, all their grants. In addition to that, all the transfers that the provinces intend to make to those municipalities. And Chair, we deliberately put it on the website, given the request from Parliament. So we will soon conclude that process and then again share it with the members. And I know the Honourable Member has requested that they want to then share with their colleagues in the provinces to then have a good feel of this 164 billion that is in the slide, but what's the breakdown per municipality, per grant, and that is a routine process that we have institutionalized. Marijeng, I think I should pause here. I hope that I've addressed the questions.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Wendy, can you finish on those that have to do with the fiscal framework?
Thank you. I will deal with them and try to combine also where they overlap. With regard to the housing emergency grant that used to exist both for provinces and local government and is now pulled to national, quite a number of questions were posed in that regard. And maybe just to explain the rationale why the National Department of Human Settlements has done this, and it's specifically based on lessons learned that they learned out of the KZN floods that happened. There are two reasons why it's being suggested. The first is that currently there's often huge delays in temporary housing being put in place by the provinces and municipalities concerned. And secondly, the cost that's charged for these temporary housing units are often also quite excessive. So the whole idea is that National can then procure centrally and actually also work with the provinces and the municipalities concerned to get these units delivered faster than what it was done in the past. So it is trying to deal with a gap in the system. What is important is National Department of Human Settlements won't be doing it on its own. It will still be working with the provincial departments of human settlements and the municipalities concerned. That will then alert the National Department of Human Settlements of these disasters that happened. In any case, there are structures at national where all the relevant stakeholders meet, where information is shared. So a lot of that information will still come through the provincial disaster management centers and the municipal disaster management centers. It is not that provinces and municipalities are fully excluded out of the process and everything will now be done by national. It is just to deal with those two gaps that I've indicated. Hopefully in time, we don't want disasters to happen. We don't want floods to happen. But if it should happen again, hopefully we'll be in a better place to respond quicker and in a cheaper and more efficient way. It is based on the, like I say, the experiences out of previous floods that happened and the response times. Then with regard to the rural bridges, I'll ask Bongani Daka to deal with that one. Then with regard to the data, it's a pertinent question as well, and when will the census results be released? Current indications are that it will be around June, July this year. And it's a very critical question because it can have a dramatic impact on the allocations both to provinces and to municipalities because the data that's used currently, for example, in the provincial equitable share, we currently don't use census data with regard to population. We use the mid-year population information. But there is a rebalancing that takes place when we get the census data. And when we did the last check, when the census took place last time, we did pick up that it actually had quite a dramatic impact on allocations. In certain cases, the population growth were overestimated for certain provinces and underestimated for other provinces such as Gauteng. So what we do when we get the census results, we phase it in over 3 years, if longer, if needed. We look at the impact and see what can provinces bear. Because on the one hand, we want to fix the allocations to be as equitable as possible. On the other hand, we want to ensure that provinces and municipalities can adjust to the new allocations, be it positive or negative. So the same applies on the local government side. We will look at what data is currently used in the local government equitable share, also in for example, the municipal infrastructure grant that's also based on census data or old census data. And then we'll look at the impact and determine to what extent the phasing is needed. But it is a very, very important set of new data set that we're looking for. And like I say, Stats SA will use that information to also rebalance their surveys to ensure that it aligns to the outcomes of the census. So maybe what we can suggest going, in this regard, that we'll give the committee an update, at the medium-term budget policy statement as well, and then indicate to the committee if the data has been available, how we've processed it and what the implications are and what potential adjustments we've made. So we can keep the committee up to date on developments in this regard. If the data is received too late, then it will have to be delayed with another year for implementation. So if everything goes well, we can potentially target the 2024 budget. If there's delays, we're looking at the 2025 budget. Then the question was posed regarding cost of employees and the balance between that. And it applies both to provinces and to local government, but particularly even more so to provinces, given that they're very personnel intensive, more so than municipalities. And we need to keep in mind that the balance will be different per each province. In certain provinces, they've got quite good balances between COE and other expenditure. In other provinces, they've got less of a good balance, but working towards a better balance. But we do need to keep in mind that although COE numbers can be high in certain cases, it is relatively high for all provinces, because you need to keep in mind the COE is actually directly linked to service delivery. If you look, for example, at education, educators play a very critical role in the service delivery chain. If you look at health, for example, the doctors, the nurses play a very critical role. So that is why provinces as a whole is quite personnel intensive. And often you could actually hear concerns raised that there's an underemployment in certain critical areas. And it's really important to look at the type of employees that's appointed that's directly linked to service delivery. And that balance is important. Then with regard to the infrastructure is the loser in the budget. If you actually look at what has been presented, quite a lot of allocations is coming through the budget facility for infrastructure process, or the BFI. There's not been large reductions in infrastructure allocations either. Actually, there's a focus on where there's good spending to look at increasing allocations, because the budget has got understanding that the balance between infrastructure and other type of expenditures are quite critical to get that right. So it's definitely, there's not an over focus on the COE in the budget. It is really about balancing the priorities that's out there and ensuring that it receives the required attention. Then with regard to the local government equitable share formula and, of factors such as fuel taken into account, and I can give a broad answer, but let's say Pao and Zetu can add if they want to. If you look at the equitable share, it basically funds 4 services in addition to the other components that specifically targeted at the poorer municipalities. What we do is when we look at the amounts that go into the equitable share, for example, particularly for electricity, we get the numbers from NERSA, and we look at the cost involved in bulk, and it will look at what has gone through to Eskom, and then determine what is the required allocation to local government. What makes it quite difficult this year is because the information was out very, very late. National Treasury had to do some of those calculations on their behalf, but did take into account the bulk allocation allocated to Eskom, and it's reworked it to be in line with the municipal financial year and actually to factor that into the equitable share allocation. With regard to the fuel cost and the like, that is part of the cost provision. And those amounts, we also work with the national sector departments to get those amounts on an annual basis and take into account the cost in providing those services. Having said that, this is definitely something that more work can be done and further refinements can be made. And there is a local government equitable share task team, and one of the areas that they're looking at and specifically focusing on, and one of the areas identified in this regard, is to look at how can we improve determining the actual cost of providing those 4 services so that when they are captured into the local government equitable share, as accurate as possible. So it's important again that we keep the committee, up to date with the work that committee is doing and how it will impact on future local government equitable share allocations. So definitely the issue about NERSA is not an area for concern. It is fully funded over the MTF and full. Then the single ticketing system, if I can ask Bongani to touch on, or Letsepa to touch on that issue, on where will it be applied. Then quite a critical issue, and it is something to do with how the system is designed, and it links back to the National Disaster Management Center. It links back to the criteria that's applied by the National Disaster Management Center when they determine allocations. And it is just targeted at social infrastructure. It's not targeted at economic infrastructure. So the assumption that's made is that economic infrastructure will be funded through, for example, the farmer taking out adequate insurance for these type of events. So unfortunately, with regard to disasters and floods and drought that impact on commercial farmers outside the small scale farmers, as mentioned, it is not targeted at commercial farmers. And like I say, if there's any further questions in that regard, what I can, and I know it's been an issue that's been raised quite frequently in this committee, it will also be quite helpful to call the NDMC to a committee meeting and actually explain exactly how the system is constructed, to give even more details in that regard. Then with regard to e-governance and how that is dealt with, there are current policies in place in government to look at that, particularly targeted at provinces, and it's also looking at basically how can it be rolled out in schools so that particularly in rural areas, to ensure that we can have connectivity across the country, and that will be quite important. And then a question was posed about the infrastructure grant and whether it can be more rural focused. The first point that I could make here that's important to note is that although the original intention was to, and that dealt with the city side of the program, also funded through the school's backlog infrastructure grant, and that's the indirect grant that goes to national and they roll out on behalf of the provinces concerned, and then there's the education infrastructure grant. That's a direct grant that goes to provinces, and the projects are specifically implemented by the provinces concerned. And then the question was posed: cannot something like that specifically be established for health infrastructure? But I can ask Bongani to add here as well. But when you look at particularly a number of grants, it does look at the backlogs in infrastructure, and your allocations will be informed in that regard. Yeah. Then with regard to the second appropriation and particularly the COE allocation going to provinces, why is it allocated through the provincial equitable share formula? It is allocated through the, and maybe I should break this down into two discussions. What do we do with COE increases in here? What do we do with COE increases over the MTF? With regard to COE increases over the MTF, that is funded through the provincial equitable share formula. With regard to in-year increases to COE, that is funded in terms of the personnel budgets. So it is not allocated in terms of the provincial equitable share formula, but it's allocated through the provincial equitable share as what we determined in terms of the personnel budgets. The reason why we do not want to do it over the MTF is because it will create a perverse incentive, because we do know that certain provinces do have very good staff ratios, and other provinces, the staff ratios are a bit excessive. So if you just fund it through the current personnel budgets, you will actually be favoring provinces that's overstaffed. And it will be to the detriment that provinces that's got good good ratio of personnel numbers or even understaffed. So it will create a very perverse incentive in the system to actually fund it on staff numbers going forward. Then with regard to, let me just change the page. The issue about the Eastern Cape and the coastal area, and there is, like I pointed out, there is currently a project under the go, which actually look at developing the Eastern Cape and KZN coastal area. It's falling under the ambit of the Department of Cooperative Governance, and they're looking of pushing it through the DDM process. So if any further information in that regard is required, and particularly the speed, DCOC will be better placed than ourselves to respond to that question. Yeah, and Marijeng and Mampu, if I can ask them Malota question to issue to be responded. Thank you. But if I can then ask Kungwani and Litsepa to deal with the remainder of the questions. Thanks. Oh,
I think Zetu will have to come in. Litsepa is sleeping in Japan now. I think he went back to sleep. So Zetu will come in. Zetu, maybe if you can come in on the specific question on the single ticketing and the Cape Town realignment of this funding of IPTS. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mama Dijeng. I will come in before Z2, if you don't mind. I will be responding to the question about the rural bridges. During the adjustment budget last year, we indicated that there was funding that was made available, and that funding only went to 2 provinces. And we did receive questions in the committee, but we did indicate that over the MTEF, more funding will be added. So the provinces that benefited during the MTBPS, and apologies, honorable members, I have load shedding, so I hope I'm still visible. But the provinces that benefited during the MTBPS were Eastern Cape and Limpopo for the rural bridges. However, for the first year of the MTEF, and I should highlight that funding currently, we only allocated it for the first year of the MTEF, given that we understand that this is new money, and maybe other provinces might have not yet been able to come up with projects. And for the 2 outer years of the MTEF, the funding is left unallocated. However, for the 2024 budget, given that these are infrastructure projects, and then they need to have like a better preparation, and we want to allocate all the funding. But for the first year, only first year of the MTEF, which is 2023-24, all provinces are benefiting except 3, which are Gauteng, Northern Cape, and Western Cape. And this is because those provinces did not provide for projects that can be funded. Just to also indicate that even the funding that was made available for the first year of the MTEF, we had to reduce it because there was money that was left unallocated, because the criteria that is used for funding, for allocating of funding, is projects that are submitted. So these 3 provinces did not submit any projects. So, but all other provinces are benefiting except for those 3. So we are hoping that in the next budget, the 2024, all provinces are going to submit projects and be funded for this. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members.
Okay, thank you very much. Zethu is struggling with connection, so let me just come in on just to add on some of the questions. I think the question that Honorable Zan asked about why we need to do away with provinces and increase the share of local government. So what I want to say there is that I don't think the issue of the share of provinces versus local government is about just doing away with the provinces, because it's about the function. So money will have to follow the function. So at the moment, provinces rely 97% on national funding, precisely because the services that they deliver do not lend themselves to a recovery of cost. Whereas municipalities deliver services largely that those that can pay should actually pay for those services. And if we come to the conclusion that people don't pay for services, then it means that we have got to tax people more so that then we can pay for electricity, water, and all that. So I think the issue of this financing differences really has to do with whether the nature of the functions that the sphere of government is responsible for. So I think on the issue of the backlogs, I mean, the rural roads, the health, the water. So I think what I want to say here is that, you know, the issue of roads is a much bigger issue, because at the moment, we are not even able to keep pace with keeping the strategic roads actually in good condition. So that is why we have added the allocation of about 6.8 billion on the roads infrastructure grant that is meant to help in making sure that we can actually begin to make headway. And that grant is allocated in terms of the needs, in terms of the roads, and obviously the utilization of the roads becomes quite important. So, and I suppose part of the challenge with regard to infrastructure, if you look at it, is not always about the money. I think Honorable Mahlangu did mention the need to ensure that before you allocate, you have identified the need, you have got the plan, you have got the capacity to be able to deliver. So what we are seeing is the problem of infrastructure is really the issue of our capacity that we are fighting so hard. And I think as Treasury, we have tried to make a huge contribution through various programs to address the issue of infrastructure delivery, even though it's something that is essentially outside of our mandate, because Our mandate is to allocate based on the proposals and the plans and the indications around the capacity. But often, even with that, you have a problem. So now what the system is providing here is the various mechanisms that the provinces and municipalities can actually approach. I mean, the budget facility for infrastructure is one of those that actually enable the provinces and local government and others, other government entities to come, as we have seen the SEZs like Kucha, because they did come with a proposal that established the need and the clear plan and readiness and capacity to deliver. But what we have seen is that even those that we thought, like for instance, an example, my city, that we did not proceed at the pace that was originally thought it would. So hence, they had to be able to, change the plan so that then they can begin to align with capacity. Then we had to throw back the money, and then now we are putting back the money as capacity is there. So I think the government finding itself in terms of performance is a major issue that, there are all kinds of things that are being done to address. So now, even besides BFI, we have allowed in the division of revenue now that the organs of state, as in provinces and local government, they can actually pledge conditional grants. That means they can, borrow against the conditional grants and be able to accelerate that infrastructure. But that will require very clear indication of the plan and readiness of that plan. I don't think the ASIDI is an example to actually emulate, because that program, in my view, didn't deliver the extent to which we expected it. I mean, 12 years down the line, we still haven't finished with the backlogs in the Eastern Cape, and we have spent so much money. So, and I think that actually shows that the issues of capacity now, even when you have got national department and the province playing in the space of infrastructure, you've got a serious problem, where sometimes we end up delivering, infrastructure that is actually underutilized, as we hear. It's happening in some infrastructure in the Eastern Cape with regards to education, for instance. So we do think that the issue of coming through with the plan that is properly, based on projections on the demands over time and the readiness becomes quite important. And I think some of the PFI, the leveraging of grants, are enabling us to really begin to refine those. But and the support that we are offering through various programs that we are trying to enhance project preparation, which is actually quite important. So I think that the broadband and the IT issue, it's probably also a function of performance, perhaps with regard to the department, and because the Department of Digital Communication, has that mandate and the funding to be able to accelerate that. So I think that and the alignment with provincial plans perhaps is something that needs to be looked at in terms of accelerating the implementation in that regard. Zeto, I don't know if we can have one last point on the what was it? If you are there on the single ticketing system, the IPTC, that money, yes.
So an indication, Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thanks.
All right. Apologies for that. Yeah, so the single ticketing system, I'd say let's treat it as a pilot. This is a reprioritization that the Department of Transport did on the back of under expenditure in the PTNG. But this system is something that is needed by the 10 cities, sorry, it's 10 cities that benefit from the PTNG. And the plan is to build the system using Sunroll's, I think it's VEST system. So for now, I'd say pilot because only 3 cities for now are operational. So the single ticketing system, which would allow a person to get on the Arieng and Pretoria and then on the Rea Vaya and Gauteng, but also on a provincial bus would, for now, I guess only benefit these 3 operational cities, which I think it's Cape Town, George, and one other city, Bongani, can help me here. But yes, the plan is for all operational cities to benefit from this single ticketing system, but also linking with the provincial bus system using Sunroad's existing system. And then I don't know, I had to leave and reconnect. I don't know if the Cape Town issue has been covered, but I think, highlight to honorable members that the additions that we're making in the 2023 budget are actually an offset of reductions that we presented to this committee in the last two budgets. And I think there wouldn't be one reason for why the City of Cape Town had to revise its implementation plan, but I think important to highlight is that this project is a 10-year project that was approved in 2018. And I guess there would have been an expectation that things will change within these 10 years, and they did change this in the third year of approval. Part of the reason included a change in the technical team, but there was also a change in, I think it's the executive in the city. Then there were the 21 local government elections and a change in political leadership. So they're just a variety or a basket of issues that affected implementation of this project as planned. And so I think even in the next budgets, we might see changes, but they are all aligned to the changes that we've been making since 2021. I'll stop there, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Chair. I think we have covered all questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, let me apologize. I have been kicked out for a moment when you start answering, and I see that members want to make a follow-up the second bite. When I gave you, honorable members, an opportunity to ask questions, I have left the ball in your hands to engage with the presentations. I did not stop you. I did not give you limited time. So I will request members, without really trying to suppress you, because this is one step towards the end of finalization of this bills. We'll still have another time. So I see an insisting member who wants to speak, because when you were responding, you also had your video on, and to me it was maybe you wanted to say something. But my take is that we should not have second bites unless, and what I say unless, I know you'll agree with what the condition that I'm going to put, and you'll go to town with your follow-up questions, and everybody else will want to come in, and we are just making life difficult for ourselves. This is not healthy. We have started very early, some of us, with some meetings, and it is very late. Otherwise, we are not going to be fruitful or productive in our work. I will allow Honorable Ryder, on condition that you're going to be brief on what you want to say, straight to the point, and then we come to the end of the meeting. I will then be closing the meeting, unless you trigger other issues. But please don't trigger other debates. Over to you, Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much for your indulgence, Chair, and I promise to be brief. I do note that it's been a long day, but we've got two very complex issues, two complex bills that have come to us that demand some serious attention. I've just had some issues that arose out of the responses that we have. And I'm not going to ask for these issues to be responded on now. I think if they can be responded on, or if information can be submitted to us after the time. So Dr. Mampo Modise in her response doubled down on her assertions that the adjustments came from pronouncements that the minister made in his budget speech. Chair, I've had a quick look at the budget speech again, and there's two issues that I don't see in the budget speech. I've raised the one already. The land bank issue was not in this budget speech, and I challenged the minister on that already. And also the political party amount that's been shifted to there. These were not mentioned in the budget speech. And if during our deliberations, if my attention can be drawn, because the minister did say that he was completing a promise that the previous minister had made for the land bank. If we can just get details as a committee when that commitment was made for the land bank, exactly what was said, and then the issue around the political party amount. And then look, the SRD grant, I think we open a big question, and perhaps Dr. Mampo herself was strong in motivating for an increase in the SRD grant. If it's being reduced to the number of people who desperately need it, perhaps we need to have a look at ensuring that that amount gets slightly increased. Chair, and then my last question is just on a larger note, if it's parliamentary for Wendy to wear flowers that that we can't pick up.
Wendy, I saw your message.
She's used to wearing very bright flowers, and we were very disappointed.
I saw your message.
The camera didn't pick it up, Chair.
Stop teasing Wendy. I saw your message here, and I thought she was just focusing on her presentation. She didn't see it, but it's one of those things. Maybe load shedding messed her up. Dr. Modise Mampo, can you just in brief, please wrap up these responses if you have, because I don't want us to leave things. I don't like leaving things hanging to say we'll get the response and we don't make time to deal with those responses as a committee, because we might get the responses and send them to members. But then can you please, in brief?
Thank you, Chairperson. So the political party funding is not Section 6 of the Appropriations Act that we're using. We're using shifts between the votes. So the political party fund is treated the same as the post office as well as SAA. And then on the wage bill, I mean on the land bank, I don't think it's a promise. I mean, if you look at the budget 2022 speech, the land bank is there, and the fact that we put it in the contingency reserve and specifically mention that the contingency reserve is to deal with the land bank, it allows us by law to use Section 6 of the PFMA. Thanks, Chair. I mean, Section 6 of the Appropriations Act. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mampo. Asudijele? Madije.
Okay, so I think we really have covered everything that we needed to cover, Chairperson.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. Honorable members, I am tempted to suggest something, but I'm looking at the congestion of our responsibilities. But also the reason why I'm tempted is because I want us to be thorough and satisfy ourselves in as far as processing these bills. I know, Honorable Karim, you know, when we, in the previous term, the SAA has always been an issue. And I always wished for a time where we will have to deal with budget and we don't see SAA being part of an issue. or being part of the agenda item. That needs to be built out. And here it is again. In 2019, when we started, we were very serious. We said to Treasury, before you issue out, or before we came to next to a point of not approving the bill, before we can allow you to bail out, we need to see the the conditions attached to that the bailout. And we engaged several engagements together with the committees in the NA portfolio committees. And we had an understanding. But then I'm not sure. Having had the discussions for today, I'm tempted to say, if possible, maybe let's find time, or let's try to find time with the relevant SOEs that we think if not all, that we think they need our attention. Together with National Treasury and the shareholders department. And in those engagements, let's involve the sector department, the sector portfolio committees that are directly responsible. Because for us as appropriations, we look at the figures, but the committees that are dealing with the plans of the department as they approve the APPs are those sector department or clustered committees, select committee in terms of NSOP. So I'm tempted to say to you, honorable members, this is what I think we need to do. We get this an opportunity, an explanation, clarity, and after that, the sector select committees relevant to those departments or those SOEs, they will be able to do their own oversight on quarterly basis or whatever time that they schedule their oversight meetings together with the relevant executive authority. So I want to put this proposal to you, honorable members. What is your take on it? Without really making speeches, just put your thinking on the matter, whether do you think it will work or not? Honorable members? Am I audible? Because I don't have electricity here. I'm not sure if I'm talking to myself or you can hear me.
We can hear you, Chairperson. We can hear you.
Oh, thank you.
You're talking to us.
Okay. Honorable Titoyi, are you still in the house? What is your take on the proposal? Honorable Ntatamletsan? Honorable Ryder?
Honorable Chair, I'm still in the house. I'm connected to 2 gadgets. Can you hear me, Chair? Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
You can see I'm connected with two gadgets with regards to load shedding. So I am here. I did hear what you say, and I'm supporting that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Ntatamletsane, I think you wanted to say something?
Yes, Chairperson, I agree. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I see Honorable Ryder. Where's the pilot? Mr. Pilot? Is he still
The
here?
pilot is listening, Chair. The pilot is listening. Thank you.
Are you also saying sharp, sharp? Thumbs up.
It's fine. It's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Honorable Karim.
I'm fine, obviously. Why wouldn't
I
I
didn't
be?
want to take it for granted.
No, I'm fine. Thanks.
Thank you, honorable. Me Liliet Marakhani, Wekai.
I'm fine, Chairperson.
Okay, it's agreed. So the team will try to find space and to deal with the logistics and see who to invite. Who do we start with? Team Treasury will also consult with them because we also want them to be part of those discussions. That will maybe assist, and we'll also invite provinces to have an opportunity as well to engage on and also enrich our report or recommendations that we are going to present to the House. Thank you so much, honorable members. Team Treasury, thank you so much. I've seen some of the members from the FFC are here. You're welcomed and want to thank you towards the end as we are closing the meeting. The staff, the support staff, behind the scene team, thank you so much. You have made it possible. And God is so good. Even if I'm load shedded, but I was able to talk to you. Thank you so much, and we hope that it will not be a lifetime thing, the issue of load shedding. Thank you very much, honorable members. It has been a long day. Keep well.
Thank you, Chair.